This is The Big Breakdown, a long look back at some of the biggest stories we're covering for you at the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today. This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here now, Tony Bruschi.
There's something uniquely unsettling about someone who doesn't just lie. They live a lie. Not with panic or sloppiness, with precision, with calm, with charm, with Mr. Thirsty in their hand. Do you need a little more, Mr. Thirsty? A little bit more? Take it off! Okay, James Craig didn't kill anybody with Mr. Thirsty, at least that we're aware of. Prosecutors say James Craig mastered a lot of these things. On the surface, a dentist, a father, a man of faith. You know, another Mormon. Reliable, respected, the kind of guy who wouldn't just invite you to dinner. You'd trust with your health, your kids, your life. But behind that facade, a different man, one who allegedly spent months quietly poisoning his wife, Angela, while playing the part of the grieving husband and texting, "I love you," between Google searches for undetectable poisons. You know, like those good guys do. This isn't a case about rage. It's about rehearsal. If the allegations are true, Craig didn't just fool his wife, he fooled everyone. And the question that lingers beneath all the forensic detail of this, what kind of person can pull this off? Today we're talking with licensed psychotherapist Siobhan Scott about what it takes psychologically to run a double life like this. How does someone balance that split between image and intent? And what kind of personality isn't just capable of murder, but of maintaining the illusion of normal while planning it? From narcissism to compartmentalization to the social forces that enable these personas to thrive, this episode is about the man James Craig appeared to be and what that tells us about what he really might be underneath. So what do you look for when someone seems perfect, but something's off? Let's get into it.
Well, if this is not a portrait of you could go either way, psychopathic narcissist or a narcissistic psychopath. It's a big dose of both. And talk about a person who can wear the mask of sanity. And again, this church-going family with this incredibly hidden dark side. And he compartmentalizes very well. The forethought and planning with this is really striking. This is a guy that had been thinking about getting away with this for a long time and working towards it. And obviously doesn't like direct confrontation, but likes the sense of control over watching his power, to kill. And so he's full of himself. He wants to be the savior. He wants people to look at him with admiration. And that's the narcissistic part, He wants to be this loving husband. And yet the cruelty of a psychopath who can just murder, as you say, the mother of their children. I mean, it's really horrendous.
Yeah, you look at the family pictures and they're all standing there in scenic locations and everybody's smiling and it's a big family. You're like, oh my God, wow. That takes work. It takes work to keep that family together, to have gone on this long, 20 years. You got the 6. Everybody, looks happy in the photos, which means absolutely nothing, as we know. But my goodness, what a way to manipulate. How, in a case like this, because we're hearing other stories of other people who were charmed by him. There was a story of a woman in the office who had an affair with him prior to the other woman, or at least an emotional affair is how it was described. A narcissist like this, they don't necessarily stand out holding red flags saying, beware of me. They use that charm to disarm suspicion. Let's talk about that for a little bit and how this guy was presenting out to the world.
He was good at that. You know, he may not have been good at covering his tracks on the internet, but he was good at charm. And I was having a conversation with a therapist last week, and we were talking about psychopaths, and she said, I know immediately when I meet someone and they just charm me and I'm so impressed with them. She said, that's a red flag that I need to step back and take a look. Is this a psychopathic person? And it's just one of these things that's so hard for normal people who, you know, we don't go around looking at the world as who can we manipulate here today? Who can we get away with, you know, fooling and tricking? But that's how folks like this go through the world. It's all a game to them. Everybody is an object that they can maneuver somehow.
Is it also a problem when you are someone who may recognize this, like your friend was? Because if you do say it aloud and everybody else is like, wow, they're wonderful. How could you say that about that person? That seems to be the other big factor that allows folks like this to kind of get away with it or go on for so long. Because even if you are the one to stand up and say there's something really, really off here, if and they know how to work it, it's part of their thing is getting the public opinion in their favor and to really squash any sort of dissent around them that somebody may be saying, this does not seem to be the type of person that they seem to be. I'm wondering how much of that was going on in this guy's world, considering he's out there doing public seminars, speaking engagements, traveling around. He seemed to know how to work it.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's going to be this sense of peer pressure to go along with the story about what a great guy he is. And I mean, we see, as strange as it may seem, that politicians and ministers and salespeople tend to be really high in psychopathic traits. They've at least got some of these manipulative qualities. And sometimes they're beloved by, you know, all kinds of people in their worlds.
I mean, what does it take to psychologically balance public persona versus private malevolence? Because, I mean, the two just, if you're a healthy brain, it's like, why would you be so dark over here when you're so bright over here? It seems like you really have to shift. I mean, is this someone who, I mean, he's got to be conscious of both versions of himself, but to flip both ways so quickly or live in that world simultaneously, that's a spooky way of living, because it's like compartmentalization, but it's like living simultaneously. Or is that where the word psychopath comes into play?
That's exactly it. And if you can get a person like this to be honest with you, they really get a sense of pleasure every time they fool somebody. It's almost like a little high, a little rush at look what I got away with here. And they use that charm. And this, again, we're talking about an intelligent psychopath. Not all of them are that smart, you know, and those are the ones that are in prison, you know, early in life. But I think in this case, this guy was just really good at it, probably fooled everybody in his church.
And that's what I want to talk about for a second is, again, he's a Mormon. Add it to the list of the insane amount of Mormons that are lining our list of alleged killers in the last handful of years, unproportionately to other groups of religious people. I don't know what it is, but we've been seeing it. How might the religious environment, and I'm not trying to insult Mormons here, but he was LDS, he was Mormon, could that have created or added pressure to maintain that moral mask? Or can it even foster this kind of behavior, deeper repression or dysfunction just by nature of what it is?
I think religious groups are a really good place for people like this to go because they role play so well. And there's such an emphasis, you use the word moral, emphasis on morality and on doing the right thing and giving this appearance. It's almost like it's a place where they gain power and they can maneuver really well in it. So it may be that we find more of these people active in religious groups. I mean, I think of the BTK killer was, the elder in his church, because they get away with fooling people there. And people may be more trusting. Most of them, I'm sure, are good people, moral people. And so when they see somebody like this come into the fold, or who was raised in the fold, I don't know if he was raised in this faith or came into it later, but it fits for them as far as having a flock of people that they can manipulate.
Is religion a dangerous thing to a psychopath in a way that they could adopt it? Where, because religion, for the most part, if you're talking about some version of Christianity or something of a sort, it's very much, well, just, believe and be baptized and you're going to be saved and all your sins are washed away. All of them. All of them. It doesn't matter what you did. It's like literally anything can be washed away. And if you have a propensity to, I don't know, kill, and you got a group here telling you, you're okay. Like your moral fabric says you're okay. You're forgiven for all of that. Is there a level where that almost encourages horrible behavior in a very non-intentional way?
That's a really interesting take. And I honestly have never thought about that. So kudos to you, Tony, for bringing that up. But yeah, the idea of your sins being washed away when you've got this incredible list of sins, could that feed the narcissism? That, the ability, how does a person like this sleep with them, go to bed at night and sleep with the things that they've done during the day? And may they have this little cognitive twist where, I'm forgiven. It's all okay. Certainly could be.
Because it's the same thing that gives people peace who aren't killers, if they're into religion. It's the same sort of thinking in a certain way of just give it to God or the higher power, and it will, because I'll get, caught up in something and my mind will be going and I'll be thinking about it all night and I won't, well, just give it to God. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that easy for me to just and it's nothing I've done wrong. It's more so like focusing on these cases and these people. But it's also the very same principle that many use when they're believers of, okay, I'm just going to give it to God and I'm going to feel good over here. When it's, regular, horrible things. This over here, same sort of method of reasoning, I guess, compartmentalization of, I gave it to God. It's God. Same thinking, just two different extremes, really.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And it would also explain all the pastors, these mega church evangelists who have gotten in trouble for exploiting people in their church sexually. And, again, that looks pretty darn psychopathic. And do they play this little cognitive game where, well, all is forgiven at the end of the day?
I feel like it plays a bigger role than a lot want to admit.
This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here now, Tony Bruschi.
Some stories break all the rules of what we think people are capable of. And some stories remind us that the most dangerous people are often the ones we trust the most. Not because they earn it, but because they know exactly how to perform it. James Craig wasn't the usual suspect. He wasn't unshaven in a mugshot or muttering through a public defender. Although, look, he doesn't look, he's got a beard in the mugshot, but it's trimmed. This guy was a dentist, a dad. If you saw him on the street, you saw him in line at the subway, you'd probably be like, why are you ordering that chicken that doesn't even identify as chicken anymore? Come on, there's better options on the menu. He was a dad, a husband, the kind of man who was supposed to represent stability, not destroy it from inside out. And yet, here we are. Prosecutors say he slowly poisoned his wife, Angela, while maintaining the appearance of a devoted partner, a committed father, a pillar of his church. And yes, it's Mormon. The case isn't just about murder, it's about masks, because when you've built an entire identity around being the good guy and suddenly you're a defendant in a cyanide poisoning trial, every smile, every church photo, every text that ends with, "I love you," becomes evidence. Not of innocence, in this case, of performance. So let's set the stage. Craig allegedly ordered poison online. He allegedly used burner emails. He allegedly timed Angela's smoothie deliveries with his cyanide shipments. And through it all, he presented himself to the outside world as the grieving husband. That's what prosecutors want the jury to see anyway. The split screen of a man who could hug his kids 1 minute and Google how to kill your wife without getting caught the next. But here's a legal twist. A jury doesn't just weigh facts, they weigh people. And when the defendant looks like someone they'd sit next to in a church or trust to fix their kids' braces, the prosecution has to work harder. They have to dismantle a character as much as they build a case. So today, with Eric Faddis, former prosecutor, defense attorney now, and someone who's been in a courtroom, and including this very courtroom, where James Craig is being tried, we're digging into what means and what it means to be put, or what it means to put an image on trial. What did jurors see when a man like James Craig walks in wearing a tie instead of shackles? And how does the law handle the case? With the defendant's likability maybe the last thing standing between guilt and acquittal. Let's dig into it.
The prosecution has really drawn a contrast between his public-facing image and what they say, the dark deeds were that he committed behind closed doors. He was this dentist. He would actually do lectures internationally. He was traveling. He appeared to be a family man, had 6 children. But behind the scenes, at least according to the prosecution, he was taking concerted measures to kill his wife. He had an affair that was ongoing to which he admits. There were also some financial troubles. So a lot messier, sort of just below the surface.
How is he, since we don't have cameras in there, is he in jail garb? Is he wearing a suit? What are they allowing him to do at this point?
His visual presentation and demeanor has been kind of surprising to me. So he's allowed to be in there with a suit on. That the jurors don't know that he is, living just across the street in the jail. But inside the courtroom, Tony, he really has this confidence about him. Perhaps it's a misplaced confidence, but he's sitting upright. He's smiling at the gallery. He is participating, conferring with his attorneys regularly. He's not this sort of meek little mouse who's cowering in the corner at all.
Which is interesting. What were you expecting going into this? Especially, now that we know all of these things that were going on from the jail, which we'll get into in a little bit. But what were you expecting when you walked in there?
Usually especially in a murder case, the defendant sometimes is scared, fearful, nervous, oftentimes kind of sheepish and unfamiliar with the legal terrain, and sort of, looking overwhelmed and fearful. But that is just not the case with James Craig. Like I said, he's sitting upright. He is nodding his head to answers that he likes and shaking his head no to answers he doesn't like. He is very much engaged in the trial. And I think, I got the impression he feels like he's somewhat untouchable.
What did you see in an opening statements from both? Let's start with the prosecution and what they kind of brought to the table. And then we'll break it all down a little bit further. But just in those opening statements, what was it like?
So the prosecution has a mountain of evidence and in many different forms. So they have the toxicology report that details what they say killed Angela Craig, that being the poisons. They also have alleged jailhouse letters and communications that James Craig made to try and cover up this whole mess. On top of that, they have a ton of texts from James Craig. So we, in a sense, have heard from him already in terms of his admissions to infidelity, what he was saying to Angela Craig, and then also they detailed a photograph of Angela Craig when she was clearly medically compromised that they say he sent to his mistress as his wife and mother of his 6 children was dying.
That right there is that's one of those where it's like, this might be the nail in your coffin. That little text right there. It's I mean, it's like the Koberger picture in the morning after, where it's like that selfie. It just seals it worse than everything you've done. Obviously, though, he's coming across, and it sounds like he looks pretty professional. Obviously, if you're an attorney, you're going to want your client to look as best as they can visually in front of that jurors. How did jurors naturally give the benefit of the doubt to someone with Craig's kind of background? You know, the stable, the family man. He's out giving lectures, got the religious ties that he's rocking, and all that. I mean, it crumbles people's sense of safety and normalcy to think that that's the guy that went and, slowly poisoned his wife to death until she went brain dead.
Yeah, I think that is certainly the case here. He kind of has a leg up, I would say, just based on that background. And during the defense's opening statement, they talked about that he is, devoutly religious, that he's a family man, was a quasi-successful dentist, depends on who you ask. But yeah, they really sort of painted a picture of him that was starkly contrasted with what the prosecution's opening said. And also, Tony, during defense's opening, they kind of went after Angela Craig, the alleged victim in this case, calling her manipulative, and said there's going to be testimony to the effect that she was a manipulative person. We haven't yet seen that inside the courtroom.
How do you think that's going to go? I mean, to go to the dead person and say, well, she was manipulative. Yeah, he was slipping her Visine by the gallon. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, you can be in an unhappy relationship. You can have a partner that's manipulative. But the way out isn't murdering them. That always seems like a weird defense to be bringing up, or even a point to bring up when the person is dead.
I'm not sure how it moves the ball for a defense, because their likely defense is going to be that Angela Craig was suicidal and somehow did this to herself. Mm-hmm. But being manipulative isn't required to draw that conclusion. A jury could draw that without sort of going after her character in that way. And you always, when you do that, risk insulting the jury, offending them. If this was in fact just a suicide by Angela Craig, you don't need to kind of pile on and make her look bad. And I don't think the jury's going to dig that.
This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here now, Tony Bruschi.
If the murder was calculated, the aftermath was pure psychological warfare. The prosecutors say happened after Angela Craig died is almost harder to stomach than the slow motion murder that came before it, because this is where the story moves from manipulation to monstrosity. Not just emotionally, but strategically. Allegedly, James Craig wasn't just trying to cover his tracks. He was weaponizing his own children to help him do it. Imagine this. We're talking about a man, again, allegedly, who asked his teenage daughter to help him create a deepfake video of her deceased mother. A digital confession, if you will. Like people do. Let's make a deepfake of her confessing. That'll help us, or me, or scar you, because I don't care about anyone else but myself. A digital confession from beyond the grave. Faked, scripted, designed to make it look like Angela took her own life. No one will catch on. All to save himself. And he gave her detailed instructions. Use burner text, scrub the metadata, hide your tracks. Because that's how you create a deepfake. Well, he sucked at dentistry, and he obviously suck at this too. It's not desperation, there's pathology, and it tells us a lot about how James Craig viewed the people closest to him, not as family, but as pawns, tools to be deployed in service of the image, the story, the escape plan. And this is what we're digging into today with licensed psychotherapist Siobhan Scott, and author of the book The Minds of Mass Killers. And she also has her own memoir out right now, which is great, called Nightbird. I highly suggest checking that out. because the core of this episode isn't about forensics or toxology. It's about emotional domination, how someone creates a system where their own children don't even flinch when they're asked to lie, how love gets tangled with fear, how families normalize the impossible when survival depends on it. We'll explore the psychology of coercion inside the home, what it means to groom someone emotionally, how denial works not just for the victims, but for the people watching it happen. And we'll ask the hard but necessary question, when a father asks his daughter to falsify the truth about her mother's death, what does that tell us about who he really is? This one goes deep. Let's get into it. Another crazy aspect of this case is his attempted involvement of his daughter from behind bars. And this is something, when this whole case started, when we heard about the dentist that allegedly poisoned his wife with the smoothies, and we heard about the Google searches like 3 years ago, I was like, wow, and this is bad. But it got worse in that time. Behind bars, one of the things he did, and there were several things he did behind bars, and we'll get to those, was ask his daughter to create a deep fake video of his wife, now dead, admitting that she was going to commit suicide. Now, clearly he doesn't know how these sort of things work. It's not easy to do something like that, and would it be figured out and caught pretty quickly? Yes. But he seemed to think that this is a world that they live in where he could just ask, his daughter to go create that sort of thing. What a weird request to ask of your daughter, and to think that she's going to actually do it and not end up testifying against you in court, which she just did last week. What does that say about his mental state in terms of the control he thinks he has over those close to him?
That's exactly it. It's almost bizarre. Well, it is bizarre that he thinks he can come up with something like this, and that his daughter is not going to have a shocked reaction. It's, very poor judgment. But again, the narcissism, this idea, I can get away with things. And he has gotten away with a lot in life. But this is, somebody who's desperate and thinks he's got more power than clearly he has.
It makes you wonder what else. I mean, we're talking a 20-year marriage here. We don't know what went on behind the scenes. You got 6 kids. There's a lot of things going on here. I'm going to guess there was a lot of psychological grooming behind the scenes. To a certain extent. We don't really have a ton of evidence of it, but the fact that they were together for this long, that says something. And the fact that he thought he could ask his kids to do that, or his daughter to do that, it does make you wonder, what was his grooming not as effective as he thought he was? And I'm wondering if that's a common thing amongst, psychopaths that also obviously have a lot of narcissistic traits, or narcissists as well. Do they sometimes overestimate their level of influence on those around them when they get to that psychopath level, worse than just your average narcissist would, who maybe is a little more gauged?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, narcissists do have, if they don't have psychopathic traits, a lot do, but if they don't, they do have an internal sense of morality. It's different than everyone else's, because they can certainly, they always put themselves first, and they're not high in empathy, but they're not killers. And that's when you get the psychopathic part in there, because they truly, they have no conscience if it's a full-blown psychopath. Mm-hmm. And so you get this narcissist thinking, well, I'm more powerful than perhaps I really am, but they're so full of themselves that they'll take it to this kind of extreme, and that's what makes them so different from the rest of us.
And this doesn't sound like a family, from what we know, at least mom and dad, that were in the healthiest of places, either or. We're taking the word of James Craig right now somewhat as gospel that his wife was suicidal. I believe there are some pieces of evidence here and there that may show she was not in a super healthy place at various points in their relationship. There's also evidence that shows that he was not in very healthy places in that relationship, and also had been contemplating suicide. Does that put the risk factor up that much more higher if your partner is already kind of on that place? Let's say James already was at that place with no care in the world for himself or his own well-being, where he might, order the cyanide and off himself, especially when he's the one that's still alive and she's dead, as far as the lengths that one will go if they're already there?
Yeah, it's hard to say, because the other thing, when I was hearing some of the reports about his suicidal ideation in the past, was that real, or was that part of a game? Was that part of a way to manipulate her, or someone else? I don't know who knew about it, but that can be another tool that a manipulative person will use, is this thing of, oh, I'm just going to off myself in hopes of gaining some kind of control through getting the other partner to respond to them in a way that they want.
How dangerous is it of a time? I know it's the most dangerous time in a relationship is when the partner says, I'm out, I'm leaving. And then obviously all that can go to hell. But this doesn't seem to be that case. It seems to be, from what we understand, he was caught cheating, and it had been ongoing with multiple people for a long time. It almost seemed to be like it was kind of understood that this was what he did for a good chunk of their relationship. At least that's what I'm taking on of it. But then had whatever revelation, went back to his wife, went back to Angela, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm changing. And then slowly after that, she started dying. Should that be a big red flag to anybody in a relationship who's had an abuser, who's been cheating on them left and right for a long period of time, and then suddenly, I'm not going to be that person anymore? Is that the time to really look out for the red flags of, well, this person seemingly made peace with this, and they want you to as well? The odds of them not continuing down the cheating road seem rather low. And I would say the odds of danger to you seem rather high if suddenly they're, Mr. Perfect out of nowhere.
Yeah, 100%. And as I have said for decades, never listen to the words, look at the behavior. And people who have ingrained patterns of behavior, usually what they've been doing in the past is what they're going to continue to do in the future. And, 6 kids, he did not want to get stuck with alimony here with her. And this was truly a dangerous time, but he was so manipulative, she probably didn't have any inkling.
And that's the scary part. And I wonder if the kids did. I mean, that's something we don't know about. We have, I guess, 2 of them so far have been on the stand testifying against their dad about the request to make the deepfake suicide video and such. But it does make you wonder, what are they trying to process right now as mom's dead, dad's on trial for murdering. He's asked us to make a deepfake video. What is going on through their mind as they're sitting on that stand?
Absolutely horrible for them. It is so hard when you have a person who's a criminal like this, for their kids to come to a place of integrating it and understanding it, because we all carry traits of our parents. And I think for the children of murderers, how do they come to a place? I mean, they can, but it takes some time and some thought and some mental work of accepting, I do have qualities like my dad. Maybe I look like my dad, but I so do not want to be like my dad. And that's a hard thing for them to work out. I have so much compassion for them.
If you start noticing you have some of those traits, whatever it may, not like the urge to go kill someone, but right. I don't think he probably lived most of his life with an urge to go kill someone either. It just happened to be the most convenient option at that point in time. But that's got to be a hard thing when you start to look, because we all have our idiosyncrasies. We all have little narcissistic tendencies and things like that, but It doesn't make us all narcissistic personality disorder with that sort of a diagnosis as well. But that's got to be a really tough thing, especially if you know that, God, this genetically does run in my line. But how much would the behavior of someone like a James Craig be explained as learned behavior from nature versus nurture?
It's a really tough one. We've been trying to answer that for forever. And what I think the best answer now is that genetics have a lot to do with personality, but none of it's set in stone. And you can have some wiring that can make you maybe prone to having less empathy for other people. But then depending on your environment and how you're raised, that the genetics are shaped and molded, and the way that they're expressed can be very, very different. So I don't think anybody inherits the tendency to be a murderer or a killer. And certainly in this case, there's no evidence that we've heard nothing about his kids being in trouble or anything. They were raised in the church. They were raised with a lot of morality, and they may have some of his good qualities, because apparently his ability to connect with people, and, he sounds like he was an extrovert and everybody liked him. His children may have some of those qualities, and that's good. And that's, something that as they try to integrate this story into their life history, that's something that we want people to come to a place of peace. I did get some good things from my parents. I can look at my parents and see major flaws with both of them, but I decided early on that I want to take the good and try to separate myself from the flaws. But that's a process that's just a bit more complicated when you have a parent who's a criminal psychopath who kills somebody.
Which you can read about in her book, Nightbird, available wherever books are sold. Let's continue on with the interview. little product placement right there, just a little bit. I have your books like right here. I just can pull them at any time. Got a little library here going on.
It's a little reference. Just
I love
flip
it.
to
Yes.
page
No,
67.
It is very good.
It. Yeah.
It is very good. The page, damn. Wow, that's impressive. So there's manipulation, and then there's this. What we've heard in this section should rattle anyone, because if it's true that James Craig tried to involve his daughter in a fake suicide video, then the murder wasn't the end of the abuse. It was just the pivot point. The moment it evolved into something even darker, something that took the most sacred relationship and bent them into weapons. As Siobhan clearly laid out, this is the psychology of control gone full spiral. A man so consumed by the need to dominate his environment, his narrative, his image, that he allegedly turned to the person he should have been protecting most and tried to make her an accomplice, not just in a lie, but in the rewriting of reality itself. And here's the hard part. These dynamics don't happen in a vacuum. They happen slowly, quietly, over years. This is grooming in the emotional sense, coordinating a family system not to question, not to push back, not to trust their instincts. And for Angela, the context adds a whole new layer to the tragedy. Because if her daughter could be drawn in like this, how many years had Angela been living in that same web? How many moments did she second-guess herself? How many times did she feel like something was wrong, but couldn't prove it? We like to think these kinds of patterns would be obvious, but as Siobhan pointed out, when you're in it, when the person manipulating you also tucks your kids in at night, remembers your birthday, brings you flowers, it's almost impossible to see clearly until it's too late. It's not just a story about a man who may have killed his wife. It's a story about a man who allegedly tried to erase her and use their children to do it. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section on YouTube. If you're listening to us on the podcast platforms, press subscribe there, but then also check us out on YouTube. Search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi so you can comment and join in our conversations on all of these cases. We have individual videos for everything and more on our YouTube channel, so please do check that out. Coming up in our final piece in this series, we're going to go clinical. We're going to take everything we've seen, the charm, the control, the cruelty, and we're going to ask the question at the core of every true crime case: what kind of person does this? And what can we learn before someone else does it again? Stay with us and press subscribe so you don't miss any of that as we continue our conversation with Siobhan. That video will be dropped tomorrow. Or if you're already here and it's already there, well, there you go. It's in the feed. So be sure to check that out. Until next time, I'm Tony Bruschi. We'll talk again real soon.
Craving non-stop true crime updates? Press subscribe now and get the latest cases, analysis, and expert commentary delivered straight to your feed. Only from the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today. Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Bruschi and the Hidden Killers podcast.